Brahmagyanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Jai Om Vishnupad Purnamam Sukripad Jukacharja Ashto Tarasati Srimad AC Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda ki jai. Namacharya Sri Haridas Thakur ki jai. Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda. Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Shadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopinath Sham Kuni Radha Kuni Giri Govardhan ki jai. Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Navadip Dham ki jai. Jagannath Puri ki jai. Ganga Mai ki jai. Jamuna Mai ki jai. Tulsi Devi ki jai. Bhakti Devi ki jai. Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Gaur Premanande. Welcome to all. Om Jnana Timirantasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshun Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Sthapitam Jena Bhutale. Swayam Rupa Pada Maikyam Datati Shapadantikam. Vande Hang Shri Guru Shri Jatapadakamanam. Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha. Shri Rupam Shagrajatam. Sahagana Gaganatan Vitam Stam Sividam. Sadvaitam Savatutam. Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam. Shri Radha Krishna Padam. Sahagana Dalita Sri Vishakhan Vitamscha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate. Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute. Tapta Kamshana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari. Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hori Priya. Vancha Kolpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindho Pyevacha. Patita Nam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda. Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Shadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Again, welcome. Welcome to Kahantri Ma. And welcome everyone. Ina and all Samveta Bhaktivinoda. And I wonder whether we have some topics or questions off the top. Question, if no one else has anything burning. All right, let's hear.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, obeisances to you. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. My question is understanding how our relationships play out over perhaps more than one lifetime. Prabhupada uses the example of straw and twigs in the river, and sometimes they gather and clump together, and then through the force of the flow of the river, they're separated again. And he uses that to describe how our relationships in the material world work. On the other hand, we create karma, and our karma is intertwined with other people. So if we have some kind of debt that we have to pay, or someone owes us a debt, then we take birth again to fulfill those obligations and whatever kind of entanglement that we have with them. So I'm just wondering, like I'm partly thinking of this because of your mother passing, and partly because of my mother. I had a very difficult and entangling relationship with her, to the point, and it was so intense that sometimes I wondered if I was her mother in my previous life, because it was just very weird. So it's interesting to wonder, am I done with her now? I mean, I guess if I become pure devotee, Krishna conscious, go back to Godhead, then I don't have to come back and deal with those things anymore. But ordinarily speaking, how does that, I mean, I'm just trying to reconcile the idea of karmic entanglement and Prabhupada saying that sometimes we're together and sometimes we're apart.
Interesting. Well, let's start with the baseline understanding. The baseline understanding is the one you outlined, that we come together like little clumps of seaweed bobbing and floating on the ocean, and we spend some time together and then we're separated. Or another example is like travelers who come together at the end of the day. They meet in an inn, they drink together and eat together and have conversations. And then in the morning they all disperse. So that's our general understanding, that we're just together for one lifetime, and then that's it. Everybody, according to his own destiny, his own karma, goes here or there, and the relationship, which was based on the body, is over. That's our baseline understanding. Now, there are exceptions to that. We hear that a devoted wife may accompany her husband to the heavenly planets, for example. If the husband performs pious activities, the wife may also follow in the footsteps of the husband and attain the same destination. We hear about the person who somehow or other took birth. He was very attached to his house, and he took birth, and then his nearby or something, and his children chased him away with shoes. Prabhupada tells that story. So there was a sort of, what would you say, inverted relationship, or a changed relationship, but there was a relationship. He did come back in that house, and that happened. Some other. Yeah, the Chitraketu, thank you. In his previous life could have been his son, and now had come, or his father, or an enemy, and now came back to give him trouble. So that may be there. Or you can think of Amba, who came back as Shikanti in order to get revenge on Bhishma Dev. So there are these instances where there is a relationship, whether it's a loving relationship or an antagonistic relationship, and somehow that plays out over more than one lifetime. So these things may happen, but the general case that we usually hear is that
speakers.
Okay, for everybody else. Just adjusting things here. The general case that we usually hear is that once we all die, we all split up. But again, there are exceptions. And now we're just attached new speakers here, so I want to see somebody say something so I can hear if I can hear you.
Hare Krishna.
Okay, it works, and in stereo. You can face it that way.
We have questions.
Okay, there's a question here from Govinda Nandini, we have four devotees sitting with me.
Yes, I have like a sub question where they say the pure devotee, when he takes birth, he liberates 21 generations of his past.
A pure devotee liberates 21 generations.
How come then the souls are connected in that way?
How are the souls connected in that way? Well, they're not really connected, but it's Krishna's mercy that connects them. Right now, someone's my father, someone's my son, someone's my brother. It's all as described in our Bhagavatam section that we're reading. Swapnur drashtam, drashtur swapnam ivambasa, something like that. That it's like a dreamer and a dream. It has no real existence. But then Krishna makes the connection. He says, all right, you're connected with this person somehow or other, you take liberation, and you, and you, and you, and you. Although the connection is superficial or meaningless or what have you, but Krishna, out of kindness, says, all right, you're connected with this person, you take liberation. Something else?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to say, I'm speculating now, if that maybe we're thinking that, you know, like for instance, if I use the example of my husband and me, I can sentimentally think, oh, if we take birth again, he'll be the husband again and I'll be the wife and our relationship will continue in that way. But it doesn't. He could be my son and I could be his mother, or he could be my wife and I could be his husband. And so it's meaningless then to say you still have the connection because the relationship is completely different than what you know.
Yeah, or you could be, you know, just someplace entirely different. You know, he's in Australia and you're in Seattle or something like that. I'm also thinking of, there was another example, but it just slipped my mind.
But give one example, like we are like sand particles on the ocean beach.
Yeah, we're like sand particles on the beach and they move. And I was just thinking of another example where people were connected for more than one lifetime. It skipped my mind, but there was another example. But
Vishwamitra and Vashishta had to like fight as birds for a while.
yeah, there was another example. It was a clear one of birth and, you know, together. But I've lost it. It's disappeared from my thought process. But we know there are those exceptional cases. But in your case, where my blessing to both of you is that you'll never see one another again.
Oh, and who's the devotee who he had the prostitute girlfriend and she was like his guru? I mean, she wasn't literally his guru, but
yeah, that's Bilvamangala Thakur
Bilvamangala Thakur.
and Chintamani. Yeah.
Yeah, I just meant if the relationship isn't the same, then really, how can you say that you're, you know what I mean? It's like if you're,
Well, but it does serve as an example of karmic entanglement or karmic connection, where there's, you know, you don't just completely zip off in different directions. There's some connection. So that may be there, but generally, you know, those are the exceptional cases. The general case, it's not as the New Agers would have it, you know, that we're soulmates and we go through lifetimes together, casting loving glances at one another and being all warm and cozy. And
Isn't there something 7 lifetimes of
yes.
marriage?
oh yeah, there's that too, 7 lifetimes of marriage. I think that's all mythology, though. I have no faith in it. Or let's say I don't wish it on anyone. But yes, there is something like that, 7 lifetimes together for married couples. But that's like a nightmare.
What about spiritual families, like in the greater ISKCON? Sometimes we get the understanding that we're on this particular marg where Goloka Vrindavan is our goal, not Vaikuntha, for example.
Yeah, we're looking for Goloka Vrindavan, not Vaikuntha.
Does that mean that no ISKCON devotees, you know, go to?
No, the example is there of Murari Gupta.
Okay,
There may be someone who's intensely devoted to Ram. And you know, doesn't matter that he's a member of ISKCON, he's a Ram Bhakta.
Yeah.
So he can go to Ayodhya where Lord Ramchandra is. No one's disqualified by virtue of association with ISKCON. Something else about, there's a raised hand here, a yellow raised hand next to a 619.
Thank you, Maharaj.
And who is that 619?
Guru Maharaj, that is me, Mukunda Charnadas.
Of course.
Guru Maharaj, this isn't exactly the main topic you were focusing on just now, but when you mentioned, when it was meant that a devotee, different generations of a devotee's family can become liberated, and other examples such as, well, not exactly the same thing, but with Vasudev Dutt requesting everyone in the universe to become liberated, and then that being granted. I don't quite follow how that how that works. It's kind of like forced liberation, or if they don't really have the desire, then if it works like that, then why can't Krishna do that? Why wouldn't that happen for everyone? And then it seems like the reason why not is because love can't be forced. Well, that's not exact liberation, but love for Krishna, but even liberation would require desire or consciousness for that. So how does that all work?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. The question is that Vasudev Dutt asks that everyone in the universe be liberated. So what if they didn't want to be liberated? Then is it forcible liberation? That seems to be the question. And I hadn't thought about it, but it does appear to be a violation of free will. I want to stay here. Forget like the prisoners who want to stay in prison because they're used to it and it's safe and they get 3 meals a day and a place to sleep. So we want to stay. What if I want to stay in this material world? So I don't really know how that works.
Maybe the devotee Krishna won't interfere with the devotee's mercy, goes in and to heck with your free will, I'm making you turn your head.
Well, Radha says that Krishna just gives precedence to the desire of the devotee. He says, the heck with it, I'm giving you liberation anyway. That seems a little, it's still then my will as a devotee violates your will as a person who wants to stay here. I would look at it and say that this is Krishna's kindness. And if someone is absolutely intent on staying here, I'm not going to sit here and say, well, no, Krishna forces him to go. But certainly Krishna extends that mercy to everyone. Or Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Vasudev said, let everyone be liberated. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, yes, by your desire, let them all be liberated. But it doesn't necessarily mean that everyone was absolutely forced. Or looking at it another way, the mercy of Lord Chaitanya is so great that if one were overflooded with Lord Chaitanya's mercy, how could he not want to go? How could he not want to go? It's like, when everything is just pointing in that direction, then how you just say, I'm going to go too. Everyone else, all my friends are going, everyone's going, and it seems like there's such love and mercy here. It's like overwhelming. It's overwhelming. So when there's an overwhelming force, we may just say, all right, let me go. Especially when it's positively overwhelming, it's not disastrously overwhelming. It's like overwhelming love, overwhelming affection, overwhelming mercy. All right, let me take it. That's Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And Krishna Prema Pradayate. He's vigorously giving love for Krishna. So that, you know how it is. Like you go someplace and someone offers you something to eat and you say, no, that's all right. No, please take. Like at an Indian wedding, if they don't offer you something 7 times, you feel like they don't love you. So no, take more, take more, take more. So then finally you feel like eating. Something more? Is that all right? Mukunda Chonan?
Yes, thank you, Maharaja. That is helpful.
Okay. Hare Krishna. Tulsi Priya's hand is manifest again.
Hi, Krishna Maharaj. Just before you said that about being offered something to eat, I was thinking how sometimes someone will say, here, taste this. And you're like, I don't want it. I don't like it. I don't, if it's like a new food, I don't like it. And they insist you taste it. And then you taste it like, oh my God, I love this. And you keep eating. And so I'm thinking,
Exactly.
You get a little taste of liberation. You might think, I don't want this. But then when you taste it, it's like, yes, I'll take it.
Exactly. That's Mahaprabhu's love and mercy. That's so nice. What is that? The Lochandas Thakur describes how everyone's like floating in the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Yes, there's some song like that, how everyone's just drowning or floating in the ocean of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mercy. Yes. Something else?
Just in the interest of keeping the conversation and the flow going, I was there were a couple nights when you weren't able to attend the other second canto sangha, and a verse came up that reminded me of something I'd like to see what you'd have to say about. Is that Parikshit Maharaj asks Shukadeva Goswami, "I've asked you so many questions, please answer them. And also, if I forgot to ask you something, would you please inform me of whatever I might have forgotten to ask?" So in the course of answering so many questions that people tend to put to you from all sides, are there any things that you wish people would ask about, but they never do?
No, nothing comes to mind as like, I go to sleep at night saying, I wish somebody would ask me about. No. I can tell you what I sort of came to this meeting thinking about, though. It's not like a wish but I was just thinking about the importance of attentiveness to our personal relationships, both with Krishna and with the devotees and others. We can, when Satsvarup Maharaj was doing his typing work and handing it in regularly to Srila Prabhupada at 26 Second Avenue, famously, he handed it in one day, and Srila Prabhupada said, "This is not mechanical. If you love me, then I'll love you." So that's part of our culture and part of our real life is not just formal relationships, but loving relationships among devotees. And that comes from, first of all, paying attention to one another, not being negligent, or what's the word? Not taking one another for granted, that they're here, they are, but taking interest in devotees, even those we may not know, or those that we could have a relationship with, and most particularly those we do have relationships with, not taking those relationships for granted, but thinking about the value of those relationships and paying attention to that. And then I would extend it to just paying attention to the people we're with. I think Prabhupada was noted for that when he was with somebody, he paid attention to that person. He was focused. It wasn't just that they were furniture in the room, but he would be aware of them and thinking how to benefit them in some way. So, and then our relationship with Krishna, which especially means our relationship with the holy name. To be inattentive while chanting is one of the offenses. Gurujan Prabhu illustrates that in one of his japa workshops by speaking to the assembled devotees and then turning his back on them and continuing to speak, and then asking, how do you feel? So we sometimes treat Krishna that way, we're chanting Hare Krishna, please engage me in your service, and so on, but we're really, we're checking, at the same time we're checking our email, we're cleaning up our rooms, we're thinking about, our to-do list for the day. So we're not paying attention to the person who matters most in our life. So that's what I was thinking about, that affectionate attention to one another and to Krishna, as distinct from sort of neglect or taking for granted or outright hostility or envy or something like that. But leaving aside envy and hostility and competitive animosity, just that tendency to take one another for granted, or to take Krishna even for granted, and not pay full attention. Something that's what was on my mind.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That was great to
And
hear.
if someone would like to contribute something on that topic, please feel free. Yes,
Say
Govinda Nandini.
In a family situation where some of the members of the family are not devotees, they are not in Krishna consciousness, you have to pay equal amount of attention to them, not give them the importance.
Yeah, in family situations where not all the members are Krishna conscious, still we have to pay due attention, equal attention, or due attention to them, and not take them for granted. That's our duty, first of all, and second of all, that may benefit them. That how much attention they're giving me, even though I'm, not doing this or I'm doing that, I haven't accepted this, still so much attention. And then that may win them over. Prabhupada's example was his sister, who was faithful to her wayward husband, so much so that he became like a devotee of his wife. So yes, thank you, Govinda Nandini. Something else?
I had something else until other participants sound off. I was wondering if you might want to tell us something about the history of how you came to worship your Krishna Balaram deities. I understand they were worshipped by Gopi Pranadhana Prabhu.
Yeah, it's a fairly simple history. I was annually coming to Govardhan in roughly Kartik time, and at that time I was spending a fair amount of time, I think, away from temples, in people's homes and here and there, where there wasn't a morning program and all of that. And I was thinking that I forget whether I was missing it, not having that, or whether I was thinking, whoa, I'm on thin ice here, because who knows how I'm spending my mornings, sort of inattentively, without full Krishna consciousness. And somehow or other, I was feeling a little insufficient. And just the idea was in my mind that maybe I should take up some deity worship. Just the idea was there. Maybe I should take up some deity worship. And then, because Gopi Prabhu had disappeared, I went over, maybe with Keshav Bharati Maharaj, I forget, just to pay a condolence call on his wife. And because he lived a 4-minute walk from.
You were with me, Maharaj.
I was with you. I was with Radheya. And we were just a 4 or 5 minute walk from his house. So we went over to pay a condolence call, and there was some talk. And Archamurti, Gopi's wife, sort of piped up that I have all these Shilas that Gopi was worshiping, and would you like one? And you can correct me on my history. You have a better memory than I do, Radheya. But what I remember is that she, I have all these Shilas. Would you like to worship them? Would you like one? Well, and so there was this one and that one, different Radha Krishna, and then Krishna Balaram came along, and I felt more interested, or I felt that I was more suited. I don't know, maybe not so qualified to worship Radha Krishna, or whatever reason. There were Krishna Balaram. So I said, all right, let's go. So she gave me Krishna Balaram, and then Govardhan came with the package. I think that was sort of like, and so then there was the Govardhan Shila on which they stand. So in that way, they came to me, and I was worshiping them. And devotees were sort of helping me get started. That devotee, Jai Keshava, he was a good pujari, so he helped start the worship of Krishna Balaram, and that's how it got going. Somehow, I think, because it was Govardhan, and
Archamurti Mataji was very insistent.
yeah, also,
She's quite pushy.
yeah, she was pushy that take one. So I think it was Krishna's kindness, and that's how it got started. Thank you for asking.
Thank you very much.
10 years ago.
Only 10 years.
Yeah.
Wow. And they're keeping me off the street, that situation is continuing, where most of the time I'm not in temples. I'm here and there, and so I have my temple with me. Wherever Krishna is, there's a temple, and everybody loves them. Of course, it's wherever they may not like me very much, but everybody loves Krishna. And they attract service. People like to cook for them, or offer them something, or give them garlands, or give them, paraphernalia of some sort. So people like to serve them. And that's also good, that, why people ask, can we give you something? No, but you can give something to Krishna Balaram. So that's better. How much can I take? That they can accept unlimited service and not fall down.
I was thinking about your point of devotees paying attention to each other. I was thinking about like the Gurvashtakam song, is Shri Vigraha Nitya Gita. Can't even get the verse right. But just that the spiritual master engages, that's part of paying attention to each other, is that unifying aspect of serving Krishna together. And it's very sweet. At least I can only speak from experience.
Yeah, I don't know if you heard, but Radhe was saying that part of paying attention to one another is that we sort of gather ourselves together in Krishna's service. And that's also true, that for my disciples or friends, I'm not just engaging them in my service, which isn't all that much to shout about anyway, and which, I don't know how much benefit anyone gets out of that. But it's so nice when we could say, hey, could you do this for Krishna Balaram? Could you do that for Krishna Balaram? And make Krishna Balaram the focus of attention, which they deserve to be. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the center of everything. So it keeps things in a nice perspective, where it's dangerous to be this. If you're not Krishna, it's dangerous to be the center of attention. Everybody's telling you how great you are, and you start to believe it. Everybody wants to serve you, and you start feeling like, well, yes, I deserve to be served. And that's, that has the makings of fall down in it, if one is not careful. So if we're able to direct our attention to Krishna Balaram, Radha Krishna, and engage everyone in that way, That's so so nice. I can tell a story. Um, this is New York. Prabhupada is flying somewhere. I forget where, but he's flying off in the evening. And we had reserved a VIP room at whichever terminal it was at JFK Airport. And we all crowded in, as many as we could. And Prabhupada sitting on a sofa, couch. And all devotees are there. And someone gave Srila Prabhupada a picture of Radha Govinda. So Prabhupada took the picture of Radha Govinda and put it on a table, a good sized picture, put it on a table there. And then someone offered Prabhupada a garland. So Prabhupada had the garland put on the picture of Radha Govinda. And then someone brought Srila Prabhupada a very nice plate of fruit. It was like a silver plate. And Prabhupada put the fruit in front of Radha Govinda. And then someone gave Srila Prabhupada some agarbatti. So Prabhupada took the agarbatti and lit the agarbatti. And then what's he going to do with the agarbatti now? Prabhupada took a piece of watermelon off the plate and put the agarbatti in the watermelon so that it was a perfect stand. So in that way, Prabhupada took this VIP lounge and made it into a temple of Radha and Govinda. And then he said, now have kirtan.
I have that song, by the way, if you want to read. I think it's the one. The second verse talks about floating. Is that the one you were thinking?
No, I'll tell you which one I was thinking. But this is a nice song. Lochan Das Thakur says, that bringing this deluge of prema when he returned to Bengal from Puri on Mahaprabhu's order, Nitai has inundated the assembly of devotees. The fallen devotees did not drown, however, but remained floating on that ecstatic ocean. There's a song, Tule Tule Goracha. That's the verse I was thinking. Yeah, so that was the temple at JFK. I made it my business to eat that piece of watermelon, by the way. Something else?
I had another question, Maharaj, since no one else is immediately jumping in, but I was thinking how we've heard you express appreciation many times when you've heard devotees make presentations that are amply backed up with Shastric quotes. And I was wondering for yourself, how do you choose what verses you like to learn, and what is your process for memorizing them?
I'm afraid I'm not much of a good student. There are devotees who have like index cards or whatever system they have for learning slokas, studying slokas. I think the way I learned pretty much everything was by editing Srila Prabhupada's books, and also by hearing his lectures. Prabhupada pretty much uses, there's a large core of verses, not that large really, small enough so that you can learn them, a core of verses that Srila Prabhupada uses again and again and again, starting with Sarvadharman Pratyajya, Dehi Nosmin Yata Dehe Komar. There are verses that Prabhupada uses, and he not only quotes them, but he makes points with them. He's got a context. There's something he wants to say, and you get to recognize if you regularly listen to Prabhupada's classes or you regularly read or edit books, you start to become familiar with those verses and recognize them and know that these are like Prabhupada's headline verses. And every now and then there's a verse from Prabhupada's repertoire that you don't hear that often. There are verses that they're only there because they came from a commentary and Prabhupada, sort of pulled them from the commentary and put them in. But then there are other verses that are in Prabhupada's repertoire that he doesn't quote as frequently, but he does quote them sometimes. But especially those core verses occur again and again and again, to the point where you're listening to a Prabhupada lecture and he's making some point, and you pretty much know this is the verse coming up, and yep, he doesn't disappoint you. It's like Sarvasya Jaham Hrithi Sannivish, or you can predict with a high level of accuracy what verse will come next once you're familiar with, once you're accustomed to Prabhupada's discourse. So I think I've learned most of them that way. I also find that it's use them or lose them. If you don't, when you quote them, they stick. When you quote them, they stick. And when you don't, they tend to go by. You may drill yourself and memorize them, but when you use them and repeat them in a context, they tend to stick. Also, when you don't have them and you need them, then you say, and then you go back and learn it so that you'll have it next time. That happens too. Also, from a practical point of view, every day I chant a chapter of Bhagavad Gita, and in Sanskrit, which takes about 10 minutes. And the verses tend to start to stick in your head. That's it.
So in essence, a combination of a lot of hearing of Prabhupada's recorded lectures and using what you've learned as soon as you can, and also regular chanting of shlokas, say from the Bhagavad Gita. Thank you very much for that.
And also other devotees, sometimes hearing other devotees use those verses and see how it's not just Prabhupada, but especially Prabhupada. And every now and then you find a verse that you just liked, even if it wasn't a verse Prabhupada used that much, you like it, you just pick it up. I also had the experience, Dukantri says, working on Bhagavatam at the press. It was an automatic absorption. Yeah. If you were editing, if you were composing, typing, setting. Yes, Dukantri.
Yes. So nice. And a lot of it was frivolous. Most of it was zero tapes.
No, we can't hear you.
Oh.
There you are.
My phone, strange phone, sorry.
No, you faded out again.
Hare Krishna. I have no idea why and how to fix it. Hare Krishna. Haribol.
Haribol.
Nope. All right, sorry. Still out.
You try speaking again, Dukantri? Oh, you're muted now.
Floating.
I was trying something. Nothing seems to work.
Maybe it's time for your typing skills again.
Might be. Certainly did miss that. Can you still not?
You're going in and out. We start to hear you, and then you become muffled. I'm not sure what's going on there.
Me neither, because I'm perfectly sitting still. Anyhow, please carry on.
Just-
Oh,
I
wait.
just wanna interrupt a second. If you're on speaker, maybe you should just get off speaker if you're talking into the phone directly, and that might stop it from happening.
Okay. That might be a problem. Krishna, help me.
Krishna did help you. Now we can hear you.
Oh, seriously?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. Wow. He really works, doesn't he? A lot of my transcribing that I did was Jayadvaita Maharaja's tapes, dictated with punctuation and diacritic marks. And I automatically had these verses drilled into my head just by doing that service.
Yeah.
It's pretty wonderful.
Yeah. I think everybody who is
And
working there.
go ahead.
Go ahead.
I'm having a hard time hearing you now.
I won't say anything then. Carry on.
No, but it was, I just wanted to say that you were, you were dictating these verses with diacritics. I was using the, what was that? The IBM Selectric Composer,
Mm-hmm.
where you had to change the font ball in between each diacritic. And they just automatically got nailed in my head. And even to this day, I know verses in Sanskrit that I cannot even, I have to look them up to see what they really are, because I just know the Sanskrit. And it became an automatic process that I was able to maintain that. At least if I can maintain that, I'll be happy. I can always call on that, and they drown out the other nonsense that goes on in my head. So it's pretty nice.
How nice that is.
And yeah, and then I got to, because I had a pretty good ear, I was allowed to do a lot of transcribing for Srila Prabhupada's lectures. I never did any of the Bhagavatam, that was your stuff. But lectures I got tons of. So I became acquainted very soon with the key verses and the core verses. And it was just nectar. You couldn't have asked for a better service. Ever. And I'm so grateful for having done that. Krishna was so kind to me. As I said one time, I uttered the phrase one time while I was working in Princeton, as an 18-year-old typesetter, looking at the Gita, thinking, boy, if I could do this for a living, they would not have to pay me. So I got my wish, and Krishna was so merciful. And thank you very much, Maharaj.
Thank you. We had the idea while we were at the press, wouldn't it be good to see what other, professional publishers do, and maybe we could learn something. So Radha Ballava, our press manager at the time, went over to Princeton University Press, and just to see what we could learn. So we picked up the system of proofreading that they used, because generally proofreading at the time meant someone sits there holding the manuscript and reading, and someone else sits there looking at the typeset copy to see if it matches. But they had a system where someone dictates, and then you can disconnect the two people. The other person can sit with the tape recorder and listen to the dictation. So we picked that up, and we picked up Duka Country. She was there. Can I talk to you? Can I talk to you?
It had the scene now is permanently imprinted in my head. I'm sitting there with the Bhagavad Gita on my desk, typing away at the Arab-Israeli conflict, which was the most boring thing I've ever done in my life. And Radha Baba and my boss walk in the door one afternoon. He's holding the Bhagavad Gita. I've never seen a devotee before. And he said, "Oh, where'd you get that?" And I said, "I was about to ask you the same thing." Anyway, Krishna's arrangement. It was amazing. It was amazing. And then I couldn't talk to him because my boss was there and they had business to do. And I said, "Can I talk to you later when I get off work?" And he said, "Sure." And he met me at my car. He told me that I was a devotee and didn't know it yet. And I gave him all my money and I took every book that he had. He filled my trunk full of books, which I delivered, I had given out to my friends, and I did make one devotee out of that. And not I, but my contact, I didn't do the damn thing, but I just gave him a book. I gave everybody that year. I went to the bookstore near the university in Princeton, and I bought every Bhagavad Gita they had. That's where I got mine. It was a little bookstore by campus, and it was the hotly contested Macmillan Gita with all the things that people didn't want to see changed, but that made me a devotee. I couldn't put it down. It went everywhere with me, everywhere. And I went in there and bought 15 of them and distributed. I didn't know anything about book distributing, but I wrapped them up and gave them all to my friends as Christmas presents. And we got one really nice devotee from out of that who has passed away since then, but pretty great experience.
Oh, wonderful.
And I look forward to the future of see what's going to happen.
Mm.
Because I'm ready to leave this home. I'm looking for my next home, the real home. So anyway, please carry on. I'd like to rather hear you speak.
No, it's so
Hare
wonderful.
Krishna.
Thank you so much, Tukanji.
Thank you. You're welcome. You're welcome. I'll try to contribute more.
Thank you. These wonderful experiences of the devotees, we can go on hearing and go on hearing how Krishna is working in these wonderful ways. Praveen asked which chapter I'm chanting now. We're chanting chapter 2. We divide chapter 2 and chapter 18 into halves because they're so long. Otherwise, we do a chapter a day. I should mention also, in answer to a Kendra's question, I practically never learned the English. I never memorized the English of a verse, which maybe is why I'm not so upset when the English changes from one, not one addition to that, but sometimes Prabhupada quotes a verse one way, gives one translation, sometimes another. It doesn't upset me because I never learned the translations anyway. If you learn the Sanskrit, then you've really learned the verse because you know what each word means, and which is why Prabhupada set it up that way. So if I really know a verse, I know the Sanskrit and I know in general, how it was translated. But I don't start with the translation and then memorize that. I memorize the Sanskrit. As a rule, there may be a couple where the English is so cool that I just learn it, but or where it just sticks. But as a general principle, the Sanskrit, which I find easier to, it's got meter, it's got, it has a fixed reason for being the way it is. So I learned the Sanskrit. Something else?
Lalita Prasad has his hand up.
Oh yeah, there's a hand. Lalita Prasad.
Go ahead, unmute yourself.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you for your lecture. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yes, okay. Well, we have a nice program here at the University in Cincinnati, and some of the Indian devotees know a lot of these individuals are PhDs and so on, and they know Sanskrit left and right, backwards and forwards, up and down, and a lot of times in their lectures they'll mouth off like who knows how many verses of Bhagavad Gita, and like it just seems to me like a big showmanship of, well, this is how intelligent I am, because most of the students, they speak so fast that, it's just slur of words that make absolutely no sense to me or to anybody else in the audience. And of course, it's a thing that Indians do. I guess, a lot of these people know Bhagavad Gita left and right. They've grown up with it, and but Prabhupada will give lectures in India, and he will speak a lot of Sanskrit, before an Indian audience, but he didn't, as far as when he was in Mexico, I never heard him speaking in Sanskrit. As a matter of fact, in none of his lectures, he spoke in Sanskrit. So, and the other thing too, I remember back in the day, God brothers just, studying Sanskrit and giving lectures and just totally destroying the language. And it was just a showmanship of, how much Sanskrit I know. So, I'm kind of weary about, when the point is, when is the right time to, and how to present the Sanskrit language? I mean, in a kind way, let's say, instead of just, showing off, how smart I am, like attitude.
How should Sanskrit be used? How should we use Sanskrit in such a way that it's somehow beneficial, that it communicates something, that we're not just showing how much we know? Well, good question. First of all, I'm impressed that the students that you're with know Bhagavad Gita right and left. So many Indian students don't know, they know Sarvadharman Pratyajya Yada Yada and Karmanye Vadikaraste. And once you're past that, they're lost. So if you're actually with students who know Bhagavad Gita extensively, that's quite, even I'm impressed, and I haven't heard them. Apart from that, Prabhupada wrote one letter. He was talking about preaching to college students, and he said that we should listen to them patiently, as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu listened to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, just patiently listening. And Prabhupada said, they're a little puffed up, but they deserve it. My sense is that if those students speak in English, they'll also be a little puffed up. It's not limited to Sanskrit, whatever language they speak in, they're smart people. Any language they speak in will reflect their learning, and depending on the extent of their ego, their what would you say? Their own consciousness of their learning, their pride in their learning. I don't think it's limited to Sanskrit. Now, what you say is true. One can show off by how much Sanskrit he knows, how many mridanga beats, how good his voice is, how well he cooks, almost how well he dresses, what his tilak looks like. Almost anything can be a vehicle for pride. And these are signs of the beginning devotee still has pride, and it's hard to get rid of, especially if you have reason for pride. So that's the first thing. My experience is that Srila Prabhupada quoted Sanskrit quite generously. Even when he was speaking to American audiences or European audiences, he tended to be, I would say, Sanskrit based, verse based. He would, if he was speaking English, he sort of had the verse in mind. You could see he'd be paraphrasing a verse, and very often he'd say the verse and then he'd explain it, or he'd at least quote some words and then explain it. So I found that he really did use it, even though we didn't understand the language. It's not that he was quoting familiar verses to us or to an American public, but Srila Prabhupada, from his point of view, the verses had potency, just the sound of the verse, and so he would quote them. You can hear there's a conversation with John Lennon and Yoko and whoever else was there, and Prabhupada just recites Nate Vidu Svarta Katim Hi Vishnu. He recites, like, sings 3 or 4 verses from that sequence. And what does John know? Sanskrit. But Prabhupada just chants it, I think, with the conviction that it has potency. So I don't fret over that. If Sanskrit is quoted, we may be conscious that the audience, and Prabhupada has said that, he said, when I quote Sanskrit, then I explain. It's not just that we quote Sanskrit with the foolish assumption that everybody knows what it means and that we can think we made the point. But Prabhupada said, when I quote Sanskrit, I immediately explain. If your students aren't explaining, then they're not communicating. They're assuming that everybody knows what they know, which is not the best mode of getting your points across. But if we quote Sanskrit and then we explain, that was basically Prabhupada's way of speaking. He would quote a verse and explain, quote a verse and explain, paraphrase a verse and explain. Sometimes the Sanskrit would be there, sometimes it wouldn't, but that's, if you look at his lectures, that's the basic structure: verse, explanation, verse, explanation, verse, explanation. So I grant your point that your students may be a little proud, a little puffed up. My thought would be, let them be puffed up, let them quote Sanskrit and be a little proud. After all, they are PhD students. Let them be proud of Bhagavad Gita and Krishna and Sanskrit, rather than the mundane theories and mundane learning. That would be my thought.
Thank you very much, Maharaj. One of them at one point said that they learned Bhagavad Gita in school, but they did not understand Bhagavad Gita the way Prabhupada had explained Bhagavad Gita as it is. So and also there's videos of some, I think, 4 or 5-year-old child in India who recites the whole Bhagavad Gita like a parrot. So that's, of what use is that? I mean, with all due respect, I mean, there must be a great soul to be able to do that. But yes, I get your point, and to be appreciative that these children are so fortunate to be born in such a great land and have, the access to this great language, the mother of all languages. It's honorable to be in their presence, actually. But okay, I will do a little bit more listening and keep my mouth shut. Thank you, Maharaj.
Radheya, who's here, says that his father, who was a Gurukul student, that's how he learned Bhagavad Gita. You just, they learned the Bhagavad Gita by rote. And then it's with you for life. They may be parrots, but then that's actually how children are, like sponges. They can absorb that. That's how they teach Sanskrit grammar. First, you learn all the Panini aphorisms just without understanding any of them. And then once you've got them down, then you start to be able to use them. So first they just recite them like parrots, and then they get it. So yeah, I remember being with a police chief in some town in India when I was on Padayatra. We needed his help for something. So I was talking with him in the course of things. I quoted a verse from Bhagavad Gita, and he just picked right up on it, and he quoted the next verse and the next verse and the next verse, with great pleasure. That's what we learned in school, and it sticks. And if we just learn the verses, the meaning something will be there. And it's how much better than learning fairy tales and nursery rhymes and everything else. It's wonderful. And time is up where I've gone a little bit over time. There's one question here which we could either park or I could answer it briefly. It's from Venkatesh. How important is it to read the word for word translation while reading Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam? I find it extremely valuable. That's how I study. I would not skip the word for word. I read the Sanskrit and I try to see how it's put together. Even though I don't know Sanskrit grammar, I get the idea at least of how it fits together to some extent. So I would encourage you, read the word for word, and you'll get a better sense. And then that makes you sort of translation independent. You're not stuck on learning the translation word for word. You know that sarvasya means of all. You know that cha means and, aham means I, and so on. And then you've really got the verse in hand. So I would encourage you to read and study the word for word meanings. And with that, we shall thank you all and take your leave. Hare Krishna.
Jai
All
Maharaj.
Hare
glories to
Krishna, Hare Bol.
Hare Krishna.
Hari Hari.
Thank you so much.
Jaya. The gang. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Oh.